You. As the Father has sent me, I am sending you. To say that these last few months have been something that in our wildest dreams we could not have imagined. In the midst of it all, we are seeing daily acts of unconditional compassion. The biblical definition of compassion suggests that compassion alludes to kindness and sympathy. Its scripture speaks of a God who has compassion for Israel and tells of a Savior who suffers for the world, and it asks us to live and act compassionately. If someone shows compassion and caring and a willingness to help others, compassion is being shown. And compassion is a word for a very positive emotion that has to do with being thoughtful and decent. And when we have compassion, we're putting ourselves in someone else's shoes and really feeling for them. Archbishop Tutu has been quoted as saying, "If an elephant steps on the tail of a mouse, and you say that you want to remain neutral in that situation, the mouse will not appreciate your objectivity." Sorry. My Lenten reading this year was a book called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And on finishing the book, I was left speechless, feeling without words to describe my reaction to his story. And that story of the compassion shown by many of his fellow prisoners who lived alongside him in Auschwitz. During the 2019 Lenten season, I read a book whose message really changed my life. And I shared some portions of that book when I was with you last summer. The book is called The Book of Joy, and it is about His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Tutu discussing lasting happiness in a changing world, all pulled together by its author, Douglas Abrams. I definitely suggest that it's a great read. Here is some of what they say about compassion, in fact, almost word for word. But my hope is that a word or a phrase or a thought may catch your attention and resonate in a sacred and holy way. So to begin, compassion is a sense of concern that arises when we are confronted with another's suffering and feel motivated to see that suffering relieved. Compassion is what connects the feeling of empathy to acts of kindness and generosity and expressions of behavior that is selfless and intended to help others. Archbishop Tutu says, one of the ways to show compassion is something that we want to become, is the very fact that we admire compassionate people. You know, you don't, well, very few of us admire a vengeful person. Why do they come to listen to the Dalai Lama? And the author says it's very largely because of who he has become. They are attracted to him because of his spiritual stature, a stature that has been created by the fact of his caring for others, even in the midst of his own suffering, the suffering of being in exile. But still, Archbishop, the question for many people is that they have so many of their own problems. They may admire both of you and say, well, that's wonderful. They're incredibly holy people. But I've got to feed my children, and I have to do my job, and I don't have enough money. Or they say, if I am compassionate, others will take advantage of me because it is a dog-eat-dog world. So why is compassion in the self-interest? And how does it help the rest of their goals in life, he asks. Archbishop Tutu, I would hope they would try it out. because it is very difficult just speaking about it theoretically. It's something that you have to work out in actual life. Try out being kind when you are walking in the street, and say good morning to the people you are passing, or smile when you are not feeling like it. I bet you my bottom dollar, he says, in a very short period of time, this pall of self-regard, which is a bad self-regard, lifts. It's universal. When you try it out, why does it work? We really are wired to be caring of the other. And when we go against that fundamental law of our being, whether we like it or not, it is going to have harmful consequences for us. When we see others being compassionate, we are more likely to be compassionate. That if we are kind and compassionate, your friends and your friends' friends are more likely to become kind and compassionate. We fear compassion because we're afraid of experiencing the suffering and the vulnerability and the hopelessness that can come with having an open heart. Many people are afraid that if they are compassionate, they will be taken advantage of, that others will become dependent on them, and that they won't be able to handle others' distress. The author says one of the differences between empathy and compassion is that while empathy is simply experiencing another emotion, compassion is a more empowered state where we want what is best for the other person. As the Dalai Lama has described it, if we see a person who is being crushed by a rock, the goal is not to get under the rock and feel what they are feeling. It is to help remove the rock. And compassion can flow naturally when we understand and we work to remove our fears and our blocks and our resistance to it. Compassion is one of the most difficult and courageous of all our motivations, but it is also the most healing and elevating. And self-compassion is actually having compassion for our human frailties and recognizing that we are vulnerable and limited like all people. It is a fundamental basis for developing compassion for others. It's hard to love others as yourself, as both men pointed out, if you don't love yourself. Wow. If that isn't truth, I don't know what is. Anyway, back to the author. When we treat ourselves with a compassion, we accept that there are parts of our personality that we may not be satisfied with, but we do not berate ourselves as we try to address them. When we go through a difficult time, we are caring and kind to ourselves, as we would be to a friend or a relative. When we feel inadequate in some way, we remind ourselves that all people have these feelings or limitations. And when things are hard, we recognize that all people go through similar challenges. And finally, when we are feeling down, we try to understand this feeling with curiosity and acceptance rather than rejection or self-judgment. The author. The Archbishop and the Dalai Lama had revealed throughout the week one of the core paradoxes of happiness. We are most joyful when we focus on others, not ourselves. In short, bringing joy to others is the fastest way to experience joy to oneself. As the Dalai Lama has said, Even 10 minutes of meditation on the well-being of others can help one to feel joyful for the whole day. When we close our heart, we cannot be joyful. When we have the courage to live with an open heart, we are able to feel our pain and the pain of others, but we are also able to experience more joy. The bigger and warmer our heart, the stronger our sense of aliveness and resilience. So, the Archbishop said with a laugh, our book says it is in giving that we receive. So I would hope that people would recognize in themselves that it is when we are closed in on ourselves that we tend to be miserable. It is when we grow into self-forgetfulness. In a remarkable way, I mean, we discover that we are filled with joy. Close book. I enjoy reading quotations. They are sometimes like a wake-up call for me. So here are a few by Viktor Frankl. No one can become fully aware of the very essence of another human being unless he loves him. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. And being human always points and is directed to something or someone other than oneself, be it a meaning to fulfill or another human being to encounter. Everyone can be taken, everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. And finally, he says, the purpose of life is not to be happy, it is to be useful, to be honorable, to be compassionate, to have it make some difference that you have lived and lived well. Maya Angelou says, I've learned that people will forget what you say, that people will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And in almost closing, Frederick Collins has this to say. There are two types of people. Those who come into a room and say, well, here I am. And those who come into a room and say, ah, there you are. An elder Native American was teaching his grandchildren about life. And he said to them, a terrible fight is going on inside me. It is a terrible fight. And it is between two wolves. One wolf represents fear, anger, envy and sorrow and arrogance, self-pity, and guilt and resentment, inferiority, and jealousy, and lies. The other wolf stands for joy and peace and love and hope and sharing and serenity and humility and kindness and benevolence and friendship and empathy and generosity and truth and compassion. And this same fight is going on inside of you and every other person too. The children thought about it for a minute, and then one child asked his grandfather, which wolf will win? And the wise one simply replied, the one I feed. Peace be with you all. Amen.
Amen.